Some 49ers news to get to on this Saturday. This is the San Francisco 49ers Report by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. Hope all of you out there are having a fantastic weekend. And coming up on today's show, Drake Jackson placed on IR. We have injury updates on Trent Williams and Javon Hargrave. And speaking of the injury report, Deebo Samuel is not on it, so he is going to be a full go against the Jags. Also on the show here today, are the Niners going to make a change along this offensive line? More information and some takeaways on that. Before we get started, Niners-Jags watch party tomorrow, giving away an autographed Joe Montana jersey to our Super Chat MVP. We already surpassed 100,000 subscribers during our live show on Thursday. That was a blast, and tomorrow it's the best place to experience game day outside of being at the actual game. Our coverage starts with an hour pregame show beginning at 12 o'clock Eastern, 9 a.m. for those of you on the West Coast. So let's get into it. Niners injury news, let's begin with Drake Jackson, placed on IR with a knee issue. And General Manager John Lynch said the other day that he's not calculating Jackson's second year, his sophomore campaign, as a disappointment. But within that interview, he did allude to the fact that Drake Jackson has been a little bit banged up. And clearly this knee issue is hurting him enough where the Niners are placing him on injured reserve. So he is going to be out at least the next 4 weeks. And the big takeaway here, this has been a disappointing start to the career for Drake Jackson. You take him early in the second round out of USC in 2022. At the time, you kind of had a need for a defensive end. And to start his rookie campaign, you saw the athleticism, you saw the twitch, you saw the ability and the potential. A lot of people thought that he was going to get a lot of snaps early on, me included, and he did. He had 3 sacks in the first 6 games of his rookie campaign, and then Kyle Shanahan said after the year he started to wear down, wasn't used to the NFL schedule and the rigors of it, physicality, playing a lot more games, oftentimes in college, 12, 13 game slate. In the NFL now, 17 games, and his body wasn't ready to go through an NFL calendar. And because of that, he got a little bit tired. And that's why he was a healthy scratch for several games coming down the stretch in the regular season and barely played in the playoffs as well. And then in the offseason here, pivoting to year number 2, there was a lot of conversations about how Drake Jackson added weight, he added muscle, he looked good in the early going of training camp, then got injured, and that kind of curtailed a little bit of his development. And now for Drake Jackson, he's on IR. And he had 3 sacks in week 1, the season opener against the Pittsburgh Steelers. After that, zilch. And then once the Niners traded for Randy Gregory, he started to outsnap Drake Jackson. And then San Francisco went ahead and traded for Chase Young going into the NFL trade deadline. Those moves are an indictment on the lack of development of Drake Jackson. I don't care what John Lynch says. They made those moves because this coaching staff is not bought in on Jackson being the guy. So for him, you can basically chalk up the first 2 years of his career as being a disappointment. Now, he is a younger player. He's only 22 years old, and I'm a believer in the talent, but there were some rumblings that maybe he wasn't taking his workouts all that seriously and wasn't really busting his ass, and those are certainly some red flags, and now he's injured here, out at least the next 4 weeks. Coming up next, Trent Williams injury, but first, make sure you sign up with Prize Picks, the #1 and largest independently run daily fantasy sports app in North America. You can get a $100 deposit match at prizepicks.com/CLNS and use the code CLNS for that deal to apply. A lot of picks that I like going into tomorrow's action, and we'll talk about those on the live watch party tomorrow as well. The corresponding roster move for Drake Jackson, by the way, going on IR, is cornerback Shemar Jean-Charles being promoted to the active roster. As for Trent Williams, on Friday, he practiced for the 2nd day in a row. And while that's a positive development that he practiced 2 days in a row, he did practice lightly. But Williams, as well as Kyle Shanahan, both basically said that the All-Pro and potential future Hall of Famer is really questionable going into this game against the Jags. They were going to do some special in-depth treatment on his ankle injury that he suffered against the Browns, and that's why he missed the Vikings game and the Bengals game. And then Shanahan said earlier this week that the injury has taken a little bit longer to heal than they anticipated. It was a little bit worse than they originally thought. And coming out of the bye week, I thought it was going to be a sure thing that Williams was going to be able to play. But when you're 35 years old, you're as big as Trent Williams is, and you're dealing with the complexity of an ankle injury, sometimes you just never know. So this is a decision that's going to really be taken up until game time, especially with an ankle injury, given the lack of circulation that goes to that area of the body. When you go on a flight, sometimes the ankle will get inflamed again, and then that can impact his game status going into this game. So if Williams cannot play, Jaylon Moore will once again start for San Francisco. And Trent Williams, who has a really good eye for offensive line talent, obviously he's one of the best of all time, as well as general manager John Lynch, both complimented the play of Jaylon Moore, stepping in for Trent Williams. And we took a look at the numbers earlier this week, if you want to go back and look at that show and those in-depth numbers there. He really has played pretty solid football, considering the drop-off that you would expect going from Williams, best left tackle in the game still, to a player like Jaylon Moore, who up until this year had been kind of disappointing. I mean, a late-round pick out of Western Michigan, you're not expecting all that much, but he didn't play all that well when he was given those opportunities. Can play outside, can play inside. If he can continue to develop, this is a good developmental piece for the Niners here, with the importance along that offensive line. The direct quote from Trent Williams, Jaylon Moore has, quote, played his butt off. And in an interview on KNBR, John Lynch said this, that Jaylon Moore did a really great job. You want to see development out of our young players. First and foremost, that credit has to go to Jaylon. One thing we do preach on our offensive line is versatility. I think he's a guy who has that. He's a swing tackle who can play right and left tackle. He can also slide inside and play some guard. And Williams also complimented some of his film study and his preparation going into these games. So, again, Trent Williams can't play. Jaylon Moore will play once again with what would be his third consecutive start. As for Javon Hargrave, a little bit of a surprise appearance on the injury report for him in the middle to later portion of this week. He has a knee injury, so he too is going to be questionable. We so badly want to see this Niners defensive line at full strength, fully getting after it after the acquisition of Chase Young. And then, of course, you put Randy Gregory in that rotation as well. Hargrave, very, very good pass rushing defensive tackle, not great against the run. That's a big reason why the Niners are 26th in rushing defense, but you're without a player of that caliber, he's certainly going to be missed. So that's a decision most likely that's going to take us up until the game as well. I mentioned a little bit earlier on that little bit of a tease, as we call in the show business here in media. Are the Niners going to make a change along the offensive line? For this game against Jacksonville and then the game next week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they are at left guard because Aaron Banks is out with that turf toe injury. Jon Feliciano is going to start at left guard. This is a player who has a lot of experience at the NFL level. He's played guard. He's played center. Last year, he was the primary starting center for the New York Giants. So he's already going to start in place of Aaron Banks because of the injury. But Shanahan said due to Feliciano's consistency and his solid play, even if Banks did not get hurt, they were thinking about putting Feliciano in the game a little bit more often and kind of going with potentially a little bit of an offensive line rotation. This is not unfamiliar territory for the Niners. They did this at times with Daniel Brunskill, who I think they're really missing this year. And I'm interested where Feliciano might play once Aaron Banks comes back. Is he going to fill in at center for Jake Brendel, who I've always thought is a little bit small for that position? Or is he going to fill in for Spencer Burford, who continues to really, really struggle in year two? And we're not seeing that massive leap in development like we did from year one to year two for Aaron Banks last year. So something to kind of keep an eye on in future weeks, and we'll of course be able to scout Feliciano at left guard tomorrow against the Jaguars. More notes here: Samuel Womack, Darrell Luter Jr., Robert Beal, they have not been activated to the active roster. They're most likely going to be out for this game against the Jags. They're just not quite ready. Their practice windows were opened up this week. And that means that the Niners have 21 days to elevate them to the active roster. So there was no rush to make them active for this game, and the expectation wasn't set that they were definitely going to play in this game. But when Womack and Luter come back, they could help out what has been a struggling secondary for San Francisco. So just some news I wanted to pass along on this Saturday here. Hope all of you are having a good day and watching some good college football. Watch Penn State, Michigan a little bit earlier. Good afternoon slate and a good evening slate as well in the college ranks too. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you tomorrow for our watch party. San Francisco. I'm out. Peace.